Hey guys, Nick and Jaden here from Ice Hockey Aussies. And with the trade deadline pretty much done and dusted, approximately a week ago, we thought we would do a 32 team breakdown of basically what each team did at the trade deadline and then we'd give it a rating. Basically, it's a standard A to F rating with plus and minuses. So yeah, to get us started underway, we'll basically how it works is we'll go through each division. So yeah, I think it would be like the West and Pacific, and then move our way down. So yeah, to get us started, we'll start with the Anaheim Ducks and Jaden, if you want to get us kicked off.
Alrighty. Yeah, Anaheim Ducks, they did a couple things in the trade deadline, getting rid of Klingberg and not too much more. So I don't rate it too highly. I don't think it was, what could have probably rid of a few more people, players like Henrique and stuff, and got more assets. So I'm I don't rate it very highly. And what do you rate it?
Uh no, not really. I think the Brock McGinn, the return they got for Kulikov, I rate that trade. But everything else, I thought the Klingberg one, they didn't really get anything in return. All the other trades were just mediocre. You're right on the front. They didn't get rid of Siffelberg, Henry, the likes of that. I think Henrique's injury sort of hurt that. The good thing about those players is at least they're still contracted for next year, so they can still get rid of them next
Yeah,
year.
that's true.
But overall, it's quite underwhelming. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll reveal it. We have it as a C minus grading. It's yeah, it was very underwhelming. It wasn't the worst, obviously, but I feel like they could have done a lot more and got more assets. So
yeah, for
if you
sure.
alrighty, I'm moving on to Calgary. And Calgary, another team that didn't do too much. They just swapped the Ritchie brothers, and that's pretty much it. They did get rid of Mackey, which I think is a good prospect in getting Troy Stetcher in return. And yeah, I thought it was very underwhelming, especially for a team that's going for kind of the playoff hunt. So I know they probably forfeited this year, but I would have liked to have seen a lot more acquired.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think because they've found themselves so far back, but the interesting thing for me is, and why I think it's a poor trade sort of period for them is they were still in the hunt during the trade period. So like they only started to fall away from the pack right towards the end. So you got to sit there and think of guys, if you guys made some trades a bit sooner, you might not have fallen that far back. You might have still stayed
Mm,
right up with the rest of the teams and actually got into a playoff spot. So yeah, it's a very disappointing and underwhelming situation. And they didn't give up much to get Nick Ritchie, which is good. But at the end of the day, he's a rental unless he re-signs with them. And he's not a great rental. Like he's a third liner. He'll get you 15 goals a season. So he's not terrible for his contract. But if they can't re-sign him, it was basically a nothing trade.
yeah,
Um, so yeah,
yeah. I guess they thought they were in the hunt, but they needed to go out and get Dryden Hunt to stay in the hunt. I don't know. Little puns. Um, uh,
oh
I,
shit.
I guess you can do the reveal for the next one, but yeah, this is definitely a D. It was very underwhelming. Could have done a lot more, but I hope they do a lot more for next year already.
Sure. All right,
M-
on to the Oilers.
Yeah,
Um,
Oilers. Yeah, like you talk about them.
yeah, it's I feel like they did what they needed to do. I don't think it was a blockbuster by any means. But I definitely think they addressed the need for a more sort of defensive defenseman, which they got in Ekholm. Um, yeah, they give up Barry and a first round pick and all the rest of that, but ultimately I think they got an upgrade in that trade. Um, they lose Jesse Puljavi, but I think that trade ultimately, we know Puljavi hasn't worked out for the Oilers. They get $3 million back in cap, which helped them get at Colm, and then they also get Nick Bukestad with the 450K they had remaining. So they almost replace Puljavi's output with Nick Bukestad at a much cheaper rate. And like I said, they lose Tyson Barry, but they get a better defenseman overall. So although I don't think this is everything the Oilers needed, I think they still, their goaltending needs addressing, and I still think they need um a lot more, especially on the bottom six for their forwards and probably you know, their bottom pairing in their defense. But it's still something. I still think they did as much as they could with the cap space they had.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, this was a reasonable period for the Oilers.
Yeah, like you said, they do slight upgrades. It wasn't the greatest of upgrades, but they do get slight upgrades. Yeah, the only thing that would have pushed them into the higher grades for me is if they did address their bottom six forwards somehow. I don't know how you do it, but somehow. That's the
Well,
only
they
thing.
wouldn't have been able to get Ekholm. That's
Yeah,
the thing. They wouldn't have been able to get him.
you'd have to give out more picks for people to retain more salary if that's the case. But yeah,
Exactly.
that's the only thing I would have liked to have seen. So I guess I'll let you reveal this one.
Yeah, so overall, we think it's pretty good outcome for the Oilers. For what they're a bit handcuffed with their salary cap. So overall, it was a good outcome. So yeah, B plus.
Yeah, no, solid. Um, it was a yeah, good grade, honestly. Good grade for what it was. So moving on
Yeah.
to Los Angeles, and I'll just scroll up, and they get rid of Lemieux, so I almost gave him an A, just A plus straight out of the bat for that. But and
Yeah.
they do sort of lose a little bit of remarks, just for how the Jonathan Quick situation handed out. But they do address like that goaltending situation a bit with Korpisalo, and they do get Gavrikov. They do get rid of Lemieux and get something sort of in return in McEwen. So it's not a bad not draft, sorry, trade deadline by any means. They still got a lot of their picks as well going forward for future, but it was kind of going all out in regards to the Jonathan Quick trade, trying to go for it this year, which I don't think they're ready for, but I get it with a weakened West. You got a good chance of going for it, I guess. So yeah, not too great, but probably a passing mark, honestly.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. I was really disappointed in the Jonathan Quick situation. I understand that Korpisalo is an upgrade, but I don't think he's a huge upgrade. It's bitten him in the behind with the Gavrikov situation because he's already said that he's going to test free agency. Um, Yes, they get Zach McEwen for Lemieux, which I thought was really good. McEwen obviously being an RFA, he gives them that same grit that Lemieux gave them without the stupidity. So I thought that was a really good pickup. But yeah, ultimately, I thought the Corpusalo was good. Gives them a passing mark, but I also think that there was no need to do it this year. I really feel like they could have waited. But yeah, I think yeah, solid C minus.
Yes. Oh, I don't think the minus is on there. I think it's only got a C, but I'll just put it
Oh,
in. C minus. There we go.
yeah,
And
yeah, I think C minus.
yeah, nah, just a bare passing mark. Alrighty. Moving on to San Jose. They did quite a bit in the trade. We'll start from the top. No, nobody trades. They get rid of Nemestikov, and then they go and do the Nick Bonino and trade. Don't get too much
A
in
seventh
regards to,
rounder. That
yeah. So they don't get too much. The Nemestikov Eisenman trade. The only real big trade is the Timo trade, and they get a lot of assets for that. They honestly fast tracked their rebuild with getting what they got in Zetterlund, Okachuk, and Mukamadulin. Two really good D-man prospects. Zetterlund's already NHL ready prospect, and is already two-way. And then they get some picks as well. So they did really good in that trade. I rate it very highly. It's probably one of the best, what do you say, trade deadlines that we've seen so far, and it's been very
Mm.
good. And they still got a lot of picks as well for the future years.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know a lot of I've heard it both ways. I've heard, the Devils paid too much. I've heard San Jose got fleeced. I've heard all of it about that trade, but overall, I think it was a great trade from both sides. And I think the San Jose Sharks got exactly what they needed. They could have, they could have tried to push for a better prospect. Potentially they could have gone after Holtz, but at this point, Holtz is younger than Zetterlund, but Zetterlund's probably shown that he's more consistent at the moment and shown that he can actually play at the NHL level. I don't think Zetterlund's ceiling's as big as Holtz, but at least Zetterlund can play. Zetterlund's not a bust. He's going to be a player that can put up 15, 20 goals a season at probably his worst. And Holtz, although he could be a 30 goal scorer one day, he might not become anything at all. And then, they also get the two solid defensemen, so plus the picks. So yeah, I think they did really well in that trade. They didn't do too much else, but it's pretty hard to get rid of someone like Eric Carlson with an $11 million contract. So yeah, overall, I reckon it was a good rating. Um,
Yeah, I'll just reveal it now. It's A minus. I think it's the first one in the A's. It's pretty good.
yeah,
And I don't know if there's much more they could have gotten. And obviously could have offloaded Carlson in some sort of trade, but they wanted to keep him, so that's just how that played out as well. Alrighty, on to Seattle, team that did
nice.
basically nothing.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah,
This one's a quick and easy one.
yeah. They just get Jacob Megna, just for some late picks. They've got a lot of picks coming up in this year. A team that's kind of in the playoff. I would have liked to have seen a bit more. Um, but obviously, you know how their cap situation is, how young their core is. They're not. I think their management knows they're not fully ready yet as well. So it was just how they maneuvered it. I just would have liked to have seen something because I like to see this team go a little bit longer in the playoffs.
Yeah, I understand that, but I also don't mind what they've done here. I think they've played it really well. They've gone, all right, well, realistically, are we going to compete this year? Probably not. So do we want to go out and hand off a bunch of picks for rentals? I think if they picked up RFAs or players with term, I would have liked to see something like that. But at the same time, I'm happy that they didn't mortgage their future for a bunch of so-so rentals just to get kicked out in the first or second round and then basically hinder their future. So although they didn't do anything, I still like what they did. So yeah, solid C minus.
Yeah, like you said, C minus. Passing grade. They didn't have to do anything. They've obviously seen for the future, but um, nothing really negative, nothing really positive there.
No,
Already
exactly.
on to
On to
Vancouver.
Vancouver. This
They've
one's a this one's a big one.
yeah, this one's a big one. We've gone all the way back to January just because we wanted to include trades like the Bo Horvat trade. So basically trades from this year, and they've done a few trades. Getting rid of Lazar for late picks. They got rid of they acquired Hronik, 4 picks that they picked up during the Bo Horvat trade. Very questionable. I think that's the big thing about the offseason. It wasn't bad. It's just questionable on the vision and decisions of the general management, just refusing to do certain things that Vancouver fans have wanted for 10 years. And I get it. You don't want to rebuild when you got Hughes and Pedersen because they will probably leave if you do that. Especially when you're Hughes brothers, looking at his other Hughes brothers and going, huh, they're in playoffs and I'm not. So yeah, like look going down and seeing this Bo Horvat trade, they got some decent stuff and they flipped that first round for Hronik. I just questioned the vision on that one, though Hronik is a good player. And yeah, you look at their team, it's really built up of trades and signs. It's not through draft, besides a couple key players. And that's my worry with this team.
Yeah, it's oh look, honestly, that Hronik trick. If it wasn't Vancouver, if this wasn't Vancouver, and this was the team that I'm looking at right now, and this is what they had done, and they had picked up Philip Hronik in that trade, I would probably have given this almost an A. But I like what they got for Horvat. I think it was a really good return, a first round Ratti and Anthony Beauvillier, who they can flip next year for even more. They pick up Kravtsov, who's a young up and coming talent who helps their rebuild. They get a third round for Luke Shen. Um, they get a fourth round for Curtis Lazar. All of that is great. It's just that Philip Hronik trade of trading away a first and a second in a deep draft. So, and this is the thing, that first pick is going to probably be anywhere from pick 12 to pick 20. And then that second round pick is probably going to be pick 35, 36.
Yeah, exactly. It's
So,
like a
so
very late first round pick that second.
exactly. So they've almost handed over two first round picks for a player that, yeah, he's good and he's probably worth it. But I question whether, because they do need defenders, and that's the thing. He does fill a need, but those two picks could potentially get you two young players that could fit this, this roster that they need going forward for a long time. So yeah, that's where it hurts. I think that Hronik trade brings their grade right down.
Yeah. Nah, you're not wrong. Other than that, they did very good. So I'll just reveal now. We believe it's around a C mark. It's a passing
Yeah.
grade. Definitely not a failure. The only thing that brings it down is purely the Heronic trade because it kind of goes against the vision they want. But I understand they don't want to go full rebuild, but they need to have confidence and build around the draft. And they're
Uh-huh.
not doing that. And the complete opposite to teams like Detroit who are doing that. Alrighty, moving on to Vegas. Um, not much happened with Vegas. They did do some additions. They did better their team, bringing in Quick for basically a seventh rounder. They bring in Bluger and Barbashev. They don't really lose anything on their existing roster, and they do offload the 7.8 mil of Shea Weber for a fifth round pick, which kind of baffles me because I would have thought for 7.8 mil and Shea Weber has multiple years. I think it's like
He's got
three.
3 years left after this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
crazy.
I'm surprised it's only a fifth. I would have thought it would have been like a first, but I don't know what's going on there. But other than that, I think it's pretty good additions. It's obviously pushing for this year. They want to go hard this year, and I think they've added somewhat what they needed to, especially with the goalie situation, injuries. They add quick, which is what they needed to do.
Yeah, and the thing I like about this is um they added the depth forwards with Bluger and Barbashev, which they needed, but they with the quick situation, they've almost sensed an occasion and gone, oh, do you know what? We could come up against the Kings in the playoffs. We needed a goalie. Quick's a two-time Stanley Cup winning goaltender, but that we don't have to give anything up for him, really. They gave nothing for him, so why not take that punt? If he doesn't work out, you go back to Aiden Hill or uh, Logan, whatever his,
Was it
well,
Thompson?
Logan Thompson, yeah, but he's out injured at the moment. But yeah, like you've got options there, right? So yeah, I thought that was a really good pickup, and offloading Shea Weber for a fifth round pick is that's just fantastic in itself. Um,
Yeah,
looking at that, I kind of feel like we've undergraded this to be honest, but overall, yeah, I think it's
yeah,
yeah solid B.
solid B grade. Um, I think the additions were good. They didn't really offload too much. Like you can have a look at their draft year. They've still got all their firsts, two of their seconds, two of their thirds. So they haven't like even being buyers. They haven't offloaded all their draft picks like some other teams.
Mm,
So they've held on to that, which is kind of saying something. I just don't give it a full high mark higher grade just because there's no fully big names, but they add everything they probably needed, which is why it's a B. It's between a B and probably a A minus for me already.
for sure.
On
Right,
to
on to the Central.
yeah, Central with Arizona. They did a lot. Just scrolling down, just showing. Yeah, they did a lot during this trade deadline. What trading the Ritchie brothers? They to get rid of Bukestad. They do the Chikrin trade with Ottawa, getting some picks, getting rid of the Ghost for a third. They were a part of the Patrick Kane deal in regards to retaining salary, and that's what they've done a lot is retaining
They
salary.
retained Voracek salary. Ooh.
Yeah, they retained Voracek's. They got Weber's salary now. But I just want to like highlight. Look at this draft for the next 3 years. They're just stacked
Hmm.
now. They basically don't have to pick up any more draft picks, and you just hope their scouting and development is there to make it work. But
Oh, it's not
I
just
love
that
what they've
though.
done.
They could trade these out. They can trade these picks out, right? Like they
Yeah,
don't have to use all of these. They can trade these picks out for, other talent. So yeah, it's honestly put them in one hell of a position going forward because yeah, I mean, what 2024, 2025, they've got 8 picks in the second round for Christ's sakes. Like that's phenomenal.
yeah.
So yeah, I look overall, I think the fact that they didn't pick up a lot for Weber or Voracek is probably the only disappointment I have here. But overall, I think they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, no, they've done exactly what they needed to do. I'm very impressed with it.
Mm,
We both are. That's why we give
mm,
them an A plus.
yeah,
De- Definitely
well deserved.
ace the class here. They got Ghost for basically for free. Then they get a third for him. So they they even flipped poor assets for good return. So they've done good on
Hmm.
pretty much all marks here already.
Yeah, 100%.
On to Chicago,
All right, yeah, good old Chicago.
and
Um,
yeah, what do you
yeah,
say? They get Wagner for free. They get rid of Domi for a second, and Kudobin. A couple nothing trades. Then they were a part of the Patrick Kane deal, and they got some picks from that. Obviously, probably a little underwhelming in regards to how
Kane
much they
trade,
yeah
yeah,
the Kane trade, but UFA how much salary was obviously having to go through a third party to retain. They got
with
what
his
they
injuries as well.
yeah
Yeah,
they got what they could. I would have just liked to seen maybe a third or something added on. I don't know. It's just something a little bit more. Then they obviously did the Toronto trade with McCabe and Lafferty. They get first and second from that, so love that haul. And then just a few other little trades there. Obviously, taking on Zaitsev's contract for a second and a fourth, which surprises
that's a
me.
solid trade.
Yeah, like we just looked at Shea Weber 7.8, and he only got what was a fifth. And this Zaitsev gets a second and a fourth. So
Yeah. Yeah, it is an odd one, right? Like you look at that and go, how does Zaitsev, fetch you a second and a fourth, and Weber and Voracek? I mean, Voracek, I get it's only 1 year left, but Weber was the big one. I just didn't understand it. But yeah, from a Chicago perspective, they've really sort of stacked their draft picks over the next 3 years. Like they've got two first round picks for the next 3 years.
Yeah,
That's solid.
yeah, that's where Tampa's picks have gone basically. They got
Yeah.
their second this year as well. So
Mm.
definitely a good haul. Would have just liked to see a little bit more for the Kane trade. I think that's why I'll reveal it now. Just A minus. Good haul. Done what they needed to. Offloaded the UFAs. Another reason why they only get an A minus is they didn't get rid of Taves. Um, probably early enough when they could have, and that's why he's probably gonna they weren't able to get rid of him. But other than that, really
Mhm.
good haul.
The whole situation with Tane's obviously.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Jonathan Tays most likely will retire a Blackhawk, so I guess you could take some solace out of that, right? Like, your captain gets to retire a Black Hawk, which, there's probably something symbolic there. So overall, I don't hold that against them too much.
mm,
I still think they did as well as they probably could in this deadline.
yeah, no, they did a lot. Moving on to the Avs, I'll let you have a
Mm.
talk about this one.
Yeah, the Avs. Yeah, it's an interesting one. You got a question, right? Like, how much did they really need to do? Probably not overly a lot, but one of the big things that a lot of people spoke about was getting that second line center. Um, they didn't do that. They get Larzella, which I thought was overly a good pickup, good in the face-off circle, but he's more of a third line sort of center. So uh, I'm happy that they addressed their center needs in some way, but I feel like they've fallen short. They didn't get any of the second line centers that they were after. Um, but at least they got someone. So I look at it as, I guess glass half full in a way that they got someone instead of no one. So it definitely improves them. Most of the other trades, I mean, they get Jack Johnson. I mean, he's been handed around like I won't say that joke, but um, he's been handed around teams like crazy lately. Keith Kincaid as a cup goaltender in case something happens. Not a fantastic goaltender, but he's serviceable if injuries come down to it. We obviously seen last year they didn't really need a phenomenal goaltender to win the Stanley Cup. Um, Matt Nieto, Ryan Merkley. Nieto helps their depth a little bit, and they don't give up overly too much for him. So, yeah, probably a little bit underwhelming. They didn't get that key piece they were after, but they don't come out of it empty-handed. So, yeah, for me, it's a pass mark.
Yeah, yeah, C minus. They, like you said, they just didn't address what they needed to address in that second line. Um, haven't kind of really since Kadri, but obviously, they do get a third line center basically. It's not what they needed though, but it is enough to get you into the passing marks. Adding depth for hopefully a deep playoff run, and cup run. That's what you need. It's what they did, and I like the pickups they did. I just would have liked to seen that a little bit more, like I said. So C minus.
Yeah, sure,
On to
sure.
Dallas, who team that didn't do too much in this little trade deadline. They do pick up some key players. The big ones really here are the Max Domi, Kudobin trade, with a second also going with that one, and then the Dadonov Juryanov trade as well. I like what they did. I actually really like the Domi pickup. It's a rental. Domi is having an amazing year. He's kind of rejuvenated. I don't mind the Dadonov trade in a sense. I actually I kind of like it. I side on Dallas' side, even though I know you like the Juryanov side. And
I just like the fact that he had a down season, but he's got that potential and he is an
mm,
RFA. I rate Dadonov. I think if he can get back to some of his old form, he'll be great for them.
yeah,
I just think it was a good trade, probably both ways in the end. And Montreal got, an RFA that they could really use.
mm. And then yeah, so that's they didn't do too much. I just love the Max Domi one. It adds that firepower that they needed, and they added some more depth. And they only basically trade out a second in Kudobin and Dadanov. You can see in their picks, they've only got their picks. They've obviously done no trades and acquiring other teams' picks. So they've definitely been buyers for a while. And are good marks. Not the best, but still good marks for me.
Yeah. No, if Dadanov can get to his 20, like high 20 goal scoring form that he was in previous years, and Max Domi can keep playing, 100%. This is really good for them. So yeah, solid B minus.
All right, I made a red, but it's fine. B minus, like you said. No, it's black. Um, there
Who's
we go.
having issues?
I'm failing. I'm failing, boys. Alrighty.
Island
They
hard.
didn't do much, but yeah, B minus. Moving on to the Wild, a team that
Man,
did a lot. Scrolling up and down here.
did they ever do a lot?
Mm.
Jesus. You would think these guys were sellers at the market, but
But they
yeah.
acquire 50% retained Klingberg. They get a Sunquist. They get rid of Greenway for honestly a steal. I don't know how they got a second
Mm-hmm.
and a fifth for Greenway. Um, they get another 50% retained player in Nyquist. They get Marcus Johansson, a very serviceable player. Has had concussion issues through his history, but 1.1 mil definitely serviceable. Then they were a part of the Dmitry Orlov trade, which is kind of interesting. You look and you go, okay, they're buyers, and then you get to this part here, and the next two they are retaining team, so they're retaining salary in regards to retaining for Dmitry Orlov going to Boston and retaining Ryan O'Reilly um, going to Toronto. So, and I think they didn't put a step wrong really. I think every trade makes sense. I think they come out basically winners on every trade, and I really like what their management's done here.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is fantastic from Minnesota's management. Trade away Jordan Greenway, $3 million cap, sort of like they get $3 million in cap back. They pick up a second and a fifth, and then they basically replace Greenway with Sunquist, $250,000 less, and they only pay a fourth round for him. I thought that trade was brilliant. The Gustav Nyquist one, they get him for half price. They pay a fifth round pick. Yes, he is not going to play before the playoffs, but what a gamble, right? Like if he comes back, you've now got a third line winger who who's got all the experience in the world. Like he's such a good player, and if he doesn't, well, you lost a fifth round pick. Oh well. I
Mm,
just thought that was brilliant. They pick up Marcus Johansson, who's just another depth player for them. They pick up three depth players in this. They Oscar Sundquist, Gustav Nyquist, Marcus Johansson, and they give up a fourth, a fifth, and a third, but they got a second and a fifth back from Greenway.
mm,
And they gave up nothing for Klingberg, basically. And
yeah,
then they pick up picks for retaining salary. I just think they've gone into this. They've ended up a better team. They've ended up with more depth, and basically they've lost nothing.
yeah. No,
So
they did good, really good.
yeah,
Uh,
fantastic, honestly.
you can't tout it any different, so definitely A plus. Probably one of the strongest A pluses in the trade deadline. That's for sure. Already
100%.
going to the
Fred,
Nashville Predators. And I
these
guess I'll
guys,
let you talk through this one. This is another team that did a lot through the deadline.
yeah, so much through this deadline. Yeah, so I mean, we won't worry about the top one. That's just a nothing trade. But um, yeah, they pick up Rasmus Asplund, which isn't a big trade either. But they pay a seventh round for that, so you take it. But clearing Mikael Granlund's $5 million contract and bringing a second round in this year's draft, priceless, right? amazing. Like Granlund's not really going to be a part of their future. He's probably a third line at best, with a big contract, and they get a second round pick in return. That is absolute brilliant. They trade away Matthias Ekholm, who, yep, great player, but we know Nashville need to either rebuild or a retool. And how's the return? They get Tyson Barrie, a 2023 first round pick, and a fourth with Reed Shaffer as well. So great return. Even though they do lose a great player, they get a really good return there. Couple of future considerations, but then we get to the big win for them, and that was Tanner Jeannot going to Tampa for a first, a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. Plus, they pick up a previous first round pick in Cow Foot. I just that was a steal of a trade. I know Tampa's GM came out and said, oh well, we didn't have all the stuff to give up, so like we couldn't throw in an extra first round or whatever, so we just went for quantity over quality. But my God, it's Tanner Jeannot. He's not the be all and end all. I honestly, I don't even know why a first round pick's in there. You've given up Cow Foot and five picks. The
Yeah,
Nashville just walk out as a steal of that one, and then getting a 2024 second round pick for Nino Niederreiter. Yeah, straight off the bat, 100% Nashville killed this trade deadline. I know Nashville fans were probably thinking, oh, well, shit, there we go. We're not going to be around the playoffs for a while, but this alone, obviously we know their GM sort of he's just left you with an absolute gift. He's just gone, this is my parting gift for you, and this is setting you up for the next 10 years, because what he's done is just phenomenal. You've got 10 picks in the first 4 rounds of this year's draft.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they've only given up 2 7ths and a six over the next 3 years. So they got all their picks. They got other teams' picks. Um, like their drafts over the next 3 years are going to be deep. And then honestly, this retooling that they're doing could flip really quickly into
Mm-hmm.
something threatening that is a cup run. Maybe a year or two down the line, which is very threatening.
100%.
So pretty
100%. Yeah.
pretty easy grade here, honestly, an A plus. Honestly, you could just give it just for that Tanner Jeannot trade. I think that's ridiculous. I believe it's up there with Adam Larson, Taylor Hall. I don't understand the value there, and I feel like
Yeah,
they've won every trade. I think
I
coming
think
through
it's
this
worse
deadline.
than the Adam Larson
Well,
Taylor Hall
I'm
trade.
just giving
Like,
that for comparison on how bad it is. Like it's in that
yeah.
echelons, and I actually think, like you said, it is worse because even Adam Larson was serviceable. Taylor Hall really only had one amazing year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so unless they win the cup this year, and even if they win it, I still think it's a bad trade. But you know,
Yeah, because
they
I don't think
yeah
Tanner Jeannot wins them a cup.
yeah exactly. So
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, nah, shocking. But anyway, on
Uh,
to the Blues.
Yeah, onto the Blues. Team that did a little bit. Obviously sellers. They give off Angelo. Nobody for future. They pick up Vrana. This is a really good pickup. Low
Hmm.
risk essentially. I think he's got 1 year left. 50% retained. If he turns it up, they can flip him for more assets. If he doesn't, he doesn't. They didn't give much up for him. They gave up a seventh basically. In regards to Ryan O'Reilly, they get up first, second, third, and some prospects. Good haul there, very good haul. I like that a lot. What they did with Ryan O'Reilly, the Tarasenko trade, maybe they could have got more. They obviously had to retain 50% for the New York Rangers did. So they get a first and a fourth. I don't think those Blaze and Skinner are too much in regards to it. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in that regards. But no, they did good. Definitely in the upper echelons for me. and they've still got all their picks basically, besides this year's second, and 3 years from now a seventh. So they got all their picks as well.
Yeah, look, honestly, I think they couldn't have done too much better in this trade period. Yep, you're probably right. They potentially could have got more for Tarasenko. I think that Verana trade is 100% an undervalued trade around the thing because if Verana, like, and this is what people forget, Verana doesn't have to be good long term for St. Louis. He's only going to be good for 6 months next year. Right,
Yeah,
like at the end of the day, he's only got to be good for 50 games, and
yeah.
then they can flip him. And they paid nothing for him. They basically paid a seventh round and a prospect that's not going to be anything. So yeah, and what? He's not going to be difficult to move. You retain 50% of that salary. You're moving to 1.3 mil. You can move him to just about anybody. And yeah, like Varana's one of those players that he could. I know he's had a lot of issues, but all he's got to do is turn it on 50 games, trade him away to a cup contender, and wow, you've just found yourself another first round pick. So yeah, I rate that extremely highly. I think they've set themselves up really well. They've got 3 first round picks in this year's draft, which is, as we know, a deep draft. So yeah, they've primed themselves really well because if they can pick up some really good talent in this year's first round, to add to the talent they've already got, they could definitely um, speed this retooling up.
Alrighty. So on the review, the grading A minus, definitely in the A's. Didn't think it was the greatest in regards to return of Tarasenko. Um, maybe they could have sold some more assets if they went harder into a rebuild or retool. But I love the Verana. I like what they got for Ryan O'Reilly and Achari, and I like what they did acquire with Tarasenko. I would have liked to have seen just probably a little bit more, so that's why it's A minus. And yeah, that's 3 teams in a row: A plus, and now A minus. But now we move on to the Winnipeg Jets, who didn't do much in regards to their trade deadline. They get Nemestikov for a
Yeah.
fourth. They get Nino Niederreiter for a second, and that's it. They add depth, but they didn't really address their blue line. And I would have liked to seen a little bit more addressing on the maybe depth of the forward line or something like that. Or but I wanted to see something addressed on the blue line. That's what I want to see. Like a fifth or sixth pairing D-man. That's what I wanted to see, but I didn't see that here.
Nah, that was my issue with it as well. I wanted to see something on the blue line. I know they don't have a lot of cap space, which is one of the issues, but at the end of the day, that's where their biggest problem is on their blue line. Um, so yeah, a little bit disappointed. Ultimately, it's not terrible. They come out of it with Nino Niederreiter. He's got term. He's got another year on his contract, so he's good for this year and next year. Nemistikov is just a depth player basically. Could be a healthy scratch. Might find his way in the team, but yeah, ultimately it's not great. It's not the worst they could have done. They at least picked something up. Um, so yeah, I think a passing grade, solid sort of C minus.
Yeah, yeah, C minus. Could have done a lot more, but they didn't do too bad. Just moving picks and getting depth, which is always going for playoffs. Hopefully a cup run or something like that is always a good sign. But could have done a lot more, I think.
Yeah, for
Already
sure.
onto
Right,
the
out of
Metro.
the west and into the east.
Yeah, into the east, into
Ooh.
the Metro. Starting off with the Canes. I didn't like what they did. I do like the trades they did make in getting Gosta Spare for a third and Pujavi for basically nothing. Uh, I love it. They, eat some more cap, 7.5 more into their cap hit. But my bigger concern is they didn't get that scoring winger that they were searching for in like Timo Meyer and whatnot. I know they were in the hunt. They were kicked out, 24 hours before the New Jersey Devils trade went through in regards to if they were going to get it, and they didn't. They don't add any scoring wingers. New York Rangers add two, New Jersey add one. Those are your rivals. They're the people you're going to come up against the playoffs. And if they get kicked out by either of those teams, I'd put it down to those teams added and the Canes didn't. But I still like the Costa Spare and Pujavi adds.
Yeah, I agree with you on that sense. They did need a goal scoring winger. I still think they've got an abundance of talent, so I definitely feel like they can overcome that. I think the Shane Gostisbehere trade is probably underrated. They get him for a third, which is basically a steal. And on a side like Carolina, they've got such a good blue line that can cover someone like a yeah, okay, he's a liability, but he's also a weapon on the offense, and Carolina can cover that liability. So yeah, I think that is 100% a fantastic trade from them. Puljavi, here or there, they didn't pay anything for him. If he works out, he works out. If not, doesn't matter. But yeah, ultimately, I'm with you. They failed to get a goal scoring winger, which hurts it. I love the Goss spare trade. I'm a bit disappointed they couldn't pull in anyone else. Um, so all in all, I think it evens itself out really at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know why it
oh,
says D plus there. It should be C plus. I would
I
just
was definitely going to say I don't think we gave him a D.
no, they definitely a C plus there. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, like good passing marks. The only thing that holds it back is just that scoring winger. Alrighty,
sure.
on to the Blue
All right,
Jackets.
the
You
old
you
Blue
want to talk about the
Jackets.
Blue Jackets? What do you have to
Yeah,
say?
yeah. Um, yeah, it's an interesting one. They didn't do too much for what ultimately they should have been sellers, which they did sell players. They did hand off a couple of players, but ultimately it wasn't a huge fire sale, which is probably a good thing if you're a Blue Jackets fan. But one of the big mentions, and I know you really enjoyed this, the handing off of Jonathan Quick, because they obviously picked up Jonathan Quick from the LA Kings, along with a first round pick and a third round pick in return for Jonas Korpisalo and Gavrikov, which I thought that was a great return for Columbus for the players they handed off. But what I liked about it is they didn't bury Quick's career. They passed him on to the Vegas Golden Knights for practically nothing. It's just bonus on top of what they had already received. But they helped Jonathan Quick get to a Stanley Cup contender for one last Stanley Cup run. And I think that in itself, the trade that they got Quick in was really good. They got a lot of good pieces with that first round and that third round pick. But to also hand him off just shows that they were, top-notch organization looking out for a legend. So yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic on that front. Um, Getting rid of Jacob Voracek's contract for a sixth round pick, absolute steal. I mean, they get no one in return, but they get 8.2 mil on their books.
yeah,
And then obviously moving Nyquist for a fifth round pick, which, how good's that? The guy's not going to play for the rest of the season. You
mm,
take whatever you can get at this point because he's going to leave at the end of the year. That's a guarantee. And you get a fifth round pick out of it. So overall, I think Columbus did really, really well in every single one of their trades they were a part of,
yeah. No, they did good.
albeit a few.
They did good by a legend. I really like the conditions they got on the first round pick in the Jonathan Quick trade, making it basically 2 second rounds. I don't think that's like even if that condition happens, 2 second rounds is basically equal with a first, depending obviously how late a first is. But
Mm-hmm.
statistically, you're bound to hit like the same rate of hitting a player. You could even argue 2 seconds is better than a first because you have a chance of getting two NHLers. But obviously, a first could hit you, a star. But I really like that. They did goodbye quick. Even Michael Hutchison's just a contract trade. If he ever turned into something, it's just added there, like turn into something absolutely amazing. And then
Mhm.
they get a seventh as well. So I love what they did. Um, Definitely high in my regards. I've given it an A. We've given it an A. I'm very high on what they did, even though it doesn't look like much, and it looks like they may have lost in regards to losing Korpusalo and Gavrikov. But I think those picks
I
and
think the
whatnot,
return,
I think the return's quite significant
yeah, 100%.
already.
Right, on to New Jersey Devils.
Yeah, so only two trades to talk about. Getting Curtis
Mm.
Lazar for a fourth from Vancouver, and then obviously the big one, Timo Meyer, and then all the assets that go with that, the contract swaps, basically. I won't go all of it, but on the San Jose side was Zetterlund, Okachuk, and Mukabadulin. They also gave up a first and a second, so they gave up a lot of prospects and picks, and two D prospects that they don't need. Their D depth is ridiculous at this point, and not having to give up a Nemec or anything like that, or a Hughes, like Luke Hughes, I mean, shows how deep that D core and depth is. And look, the conditions aren't too, you know, major in regards to those trades. So they get the player they've needed for probably, I don't know, 10 seasons, 5 seasons, however long you say, in a
Mhm,
scoring winger. They haven't had it
mhm.
forever. Maybe even since like what's his name, the Russian. I'm going blank. You will know.
Kovalchuk,
Yeah, Kovalchuk.
Ilya
Yeah,
Kovalchuk. Yeah.
like they basically haven't had a player of that caliber on the wings for since Kovalchuk. So they finally get him. Adds everything going again with Hughes or Nico Hischier. And they got their man. Like they were going for Timo, and they got him. And that's the difference between New Jersey and the Canes, really.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, you're exactly right. They gave up a lot for him, but they don't lose out because their prospect pool is still ridiculous. At the end of the day, these players probably, I know Zetterlund was in the lineup this year, but he probably doesn't stay around for long. Neither does Okachuk and or Mukhamadullin ever get an opportunity because of how deep they are. They're great players. They're going to be serviceable NHL players, all of them. But in a Devils outfit, they probably weren't going to get a chance. So they get their chance at San Jose to make something of themselves, and New Jersey get the goal scoring winger that they desperately need. And they pick up Curtis Lazar for a fourth, who's just a good depth player that gives them a bit of grit. So yeah, overall, I think New Jersey addressed the two areas that they needed. That's a goal scoring winger and a bit of grit
Mm,
in their forward line. So
yeah,
100% A plus.
yeah, A plus. They added what they needed to. They didn't go crazy in adding too much. Didn't sell what they didn't need to sell. Their team only got better. The only thing there in their roster they traded is Zetterlund, and he's two way, and he was your third liner basically where he was playing. But yeah, definitely
Hmm.
A plus. They added what they needed. Alrighty, on
All right,
to the
on to New
Islanders.
York.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not too much to
pretty
say here.
easy one, this one.
Yeah, two trades, separated basically by a month. Getting Engvall for a third round, and then trading in Horvat for a pretty substantial package here in Beauvilliers, a big prospect in Aturati, and then a first round that had a condition. Um, I like the Horvat trade in regards to they got the play like the exact type of player they needed, and they get Engvall. I just would have liked to seen a little bit more. Obviously they're in that playoff hunt, and I feel like they needed to add another somewhat of like a top six, like at least a top nine type player or a top four D man or something like that, just to really sound that make sure that they probably make the playoffs this year. And honestly, next year onwards, they could look very scary if they keep everything together.
Yeah, I think, one of the um, big underrated things here and what I think sort of drags it down is the Anthony Beauvillier part of that Bo Horvat trade. I think you're 100% right in the fact that Horvat is a player that fits their system well, is a player that they needed, um, but they also give out some pretty like it's pretty pricey, right? Like 2023 first round pick in a deep draft. Um, a first round pick in Aturati, who's it's not like we're talking about a first round pick from what 4 years ago that is a iffy, will he make it, will he not? He's looking pretty promising to at least be a serviceable NHL player. So yeah, and then you get Anthony Beauvillier with a year on his contract. Um, he since the trade, Beauvillier's put up more points than Bo Horvat. Um, he scored more goals and put up more points. So, yeah, it's just I know that it was a player that they needed. I'm just questioning whether it was the right call because I honestly don't know. And I know they re-signed Horvat, which was great, but I don't know if it was the right thing moving forward. I just don't know if they've got enough. As you said, you feel like they to be that contending team, they still missing pieces
Mm,
and they're only getting older. If they're not going to contend this year, which I don't think they're going to, that aging team just makes it harder and harder for them to contend in the years to come. And they've just traded out three potential like helpers in a rebuild. So yeah, I don't know. I like it. I think Horvat does fit their system well, but I think they've fallen short by, three or four pieces here.
yeah. Another thing with this team, they're one of the few teams that has only their draft picks for the next 3 years. So not doing any draft pick swaps or anything like that. But I think it's a solid. I like the Bo Horvat. They pick up Angle, but they, like you said, they need to pick up a little bit more. So, a, a B tier rank. It was it was alright. Better than passing. Getting a Horvat. They upgraded there. It would have been way better if they didn't get rid of Beauvillier in that trade because I think that would have made them really sound and gave them way more depth. But yeah, nice solid B for me. All
Yeah,
right.
I think the Bavilier trade's the part that killed it because they give up a piece that would have helped them in this playoff. So yeah,
Alrighty. Moving on to New York Rangers. A lot going on here. I guess I'll just start rifling off through it. First couple, just a few little AHL swaps and future considerations. Then we got the Patrick Kane deal. They give up a little bit for him. Third rounder, second rounder, and a fourth rounder. It's but they get the man they needed, and they also get Cooper Zek, just AHL, a little contract there. Then another future considerations, just a little bit more in regards to small trades, not really too much. And then I'll just mention the Tarasenko trade in regards to acquiring that from St. Louis, 50% retention. They also get Nico Mikola, and they didn't have to give up too much. So we already discussed this trade. They only gave really up a first and a fourth, and Samuel Blaze, who I don't rate too highly. So they did really good with that trade. They got the players they wanted, really going all out on firepower. With two somewhat defensive liabilities strikers, but they added what they wanted. It makes them better and adds way more depth. Players playing on the second line can now play on the third line and whatnot. So they didn't really put a step wrong. Just a lot of low ranked middle trades there as well. And they also did pick up Tyler Motte from Ottawa Senators for Julian Gauthier in a seventh.
uh, I yeah, I overall I really like in this trade period. I think the Nico Mikola trade is with the inclusion in the Tarasenko trade is a very underrated piece. I think one of their big things is they needed that defensive
Oh, you're still there? You cut out. You still
I
there?
had a trade.
Oh, there you are.
Yep,
Yep, that's cool.
sorry. Cut out. I think my internet just dropped for a little bit. Um, Sorry, guys. Yeah, ultimately, I think yeah, the Mikola trade was one of the most underrated, I think, of this whole thing. I know they got Kane, they got Tarasenko, but I reckon Mikola helps them just as much as those two wingers do because he is just so solid on that blue line and he's exactly what they needed. So yeah, they get two phenomenal wingers, two Stanley Cup winning wingers. They don't give up a whole lot, and yeah, for me, it makes them one of the strongest contenders in the NHL. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's
absolutely solid
I think it's a pretty standard, straightforward A plus here. When you're adding that much firepower, um, it's pretty standard, straightforward. And they, like you said, they didn't have to sell the bank in regards to acquiring them. Obviously, being rentals, but uh, they are going for it this year.
for sure.
Alrighty, on to the
All right.
biggest trading moving team this year, the Flyers, and they didn't do too much in regards to just getting a sixth for Patrick Brown, the Brandon Lemieux trade going to the home that suits him best, giving up Zach McEwen for him. I don't like that trade, obviously, because I don't like Brandon Lemieux, but they get someone that probably fits their style, which is good for them. And then they gave up Isaac Ratcliffe for a future, so not too
They
much to
shit the
go on here.
bed so hard.
Yeah,
They shit the bed so hard. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat this.
yeah.
Like they're gonna lose Van Riemsdyk unless he chooses to sign with them, which I just why would you at this point at 33 years old? They're gonna lose Van Riemsdyk for literally nothing. Nothing. They got Brandon Lemieux for an RFA, and the other guy's a better player. And Lemieux's a
Yep.
UFA. He can just walk at the end of the season. So basically, you handed off a good quality grit. Yeah, okay, he's a fourth liner, but he's a good, gritty, solid, hard playing fourth liner. And
Yeah.
you got in return a UFA who's just an absolute scumbag and is more trouble than he's worth. Okay, cool. That's your second trade. And then what else did you get? Nothing. Nothing.
Basically, all they
Future
get is a fifth and
consideration.
a sixth round pick. That's what they get. By
Yeah,
offloading three
it,
players. One of them being AHL.
it's just
A
trash.
rebuilding team, they don't do any big trades, which I just think
No.
makes their rebuild look longer. Um, they're missing their second round this year as well. They've only got one first this year. With the way the metro is going, this looks like it could be a really horrible rebuild if the way this trade deadline worked. So the first one of the day, but straight F didn't do anything. Even the trades they did do, they could have been way better. And yeah, straight F didn't like it already.
Nah, I 100% terrible. Probably the worst performing team at the deadline.
Alrighty, on to the Penguins, and this is an interesting one. Um, on what they did. They get Dmitry Kulikov, but they give up Brock McGinn in a third. Then on the second one, they get Nick Bonino, but they, give up a seventh and a fifth. And look, yeah, I guess it's Nick Bonino's played with the Penguins. I guess Crosby and whatnot know how to play with him, and they liked him, so that's probably why they went out and requested him most likely to come back to the management.
Mm.
They go and pick up Granlund for a second, and then they get rid of Bluger for Deliberatory and a third. So, and obviously the Kulikov trade kind of balanced that way because they had to get under the salary cap, as you can see, plus 500,000. I think they were 200,000 over the salary cap, so they get under, and yeah, a bit lackluster for a team that's probably like has said they're going for it in regards to the signings of the old vets, and I don't feel like these trades make them all that much better for this playoff run. And even if they make the playoffs, like doesn't make them a cup contender.
Yeah, look, well, yeah, it 100% is lackluster. I think. and I just overly think they overpaid for pretty much everything. Like Mikael Granlund, he's second round, is probably not too bad, but he wears a $5 million contract. That's a big contract. Then you got the Kulikov, which I don't really think he was overly that necessary. I know we're talking about it was obviously a cap dump so that they could fit Benino, but they lose Brock McGinn and a third round pick. I just I get Nick Benino was a big part of their Stanley Cup winning, back to back, but he's 7 years old. Like I don't know if he's still the old Nick Bonino that he once was. Um, yeah, I just overall for what they gave up and what they got in return. So realistically, they gave up Brock McGinn, a third round pick, a seventh round pick, a fifth round pick, a second round pick, and in return they get Granlund, Bonino, and Kulikov. And obviously there's the Teddy Bluger one down below for a third, but I don't think they get any better, really, or overly that much better. And for what they gave up, and they're all rentals as well, except for Granlund. Granlund has term, but Nick Bonino and Kulikov are both rentals.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
very
yeah,
lackluster.
very underwhelmed. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
a D plus, definitely like a failing grade, but just just failing, and
Yeah,
not much more you can say. They didn't like give up too much in regards like their picks were like later on picks besides the second with Granlund. Um, but yeah, just didn't add enough if for what they were doing.
for
Alrighty,
sure.
on to the Capitals. I'll let you talk about these guys.
Yeah, so look, I think Washington did quite well. I think there's probably a few Caps fans out there that are a bit disappointed that this is the way they've gone with it. But it's pretty clear that, especially with the injuries that the Capitals have faced this year, um, the playoffs and contending for another Stanley Cup was probably a very, very long shot. So management did, I think what any good management would do, you've addressed that you're not going to be competing this year. So what do? You move on your UFAs. And I think their return was fantastic, right? They moved Lars Eller on for a second round pick. They move Eric Gustafsson and a 2023 first round pick that they got from Boston through the Dmitry Orlov trade for Rasmus Standine, who is a young up and coming defender. He's he's going to help their retool and he's going to help them in years to come. So I think that's a fantastic trade. Um, then they get rid of Marcus Johansson for a third, which I think was a great return for what Johansson is. And then the big one with the Dmitry Orlov trade. I know a lot of people probably didn't want to see Orlov go, but for the return they got for him, let him go. Honestly, let him go. So, they let go of a UFA that's probably not going to re-sign. They get in return Craig Smith, a first round, 2023 first round pick, 2024 third, a 2025 second round pick. So ultimately they moved the first round pick on for Erasmus Sandin. But out of this whole thing, they end up with a good up and coming 22-year-old defenseman in Sandine, two second round picks, two third round picks, and Craig Smith for ultimately all of their UFAs. So I 100%, I love what they've done here. I think that this is going to help them in the retooling phase, whether they turn the picks that they received into players or if they actually do go to the draft with them, who knows? But ultimately, this is going to help speed up their retooling. So hopefully, they can be competitive in what will be Ovi's last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they get a little bit of an extra push for me just for making that decision to do this retool during a season that they could have gone, nah, we're going for it. Um, because they were still sort of sniffing there, but that's why they get a little bit more edge for me. I can't say much more because you've covered pretty much everything. So definitely an A. I don't think they lose on any of the trades here. They come out swimming on pretty much all of them, and they've
Mhm.
added some picks in depth for 2024 and 2025. And look, it's going to be hard for them. Aging team, probably the end of an era. But this is how you fast track a restructure into being another cup contender in the future.
Yeah,
Alrighty,
100%.
on
Right.
to the
Out of the
next division.
Metro and into the Atlantic. Yep.
Alrighty,
With the big bad Boston Bruins. Jeez. Is there anything they can't do this year?
yeah, they're winning on all fronts. They add Bertuzzi for a first and a fourth. They little trade here, getting Shane Bowers for Keith Kincaid. Just little swaps there. And then the nice big one that's really panned out well so far is the Dmitry Orlov trade, and they've done really well with that one. Getting Hathaway as well, and they do give up a fair bit. First, second, third, and Craig Smith, but and a fifth in regards to Minnesota Wild retaining. But I love it. He's working out really well there. This is the year to go for it, and that was a really good pickup in Dmitry Orlov. Orlov, great player. It's what I like. Probably one of the best teams, if not the best team ever, in my opinion. And now they just added better to it. Like they didn't
Mm.
really come out on losers on any of these trades. So
No.
very scary, very scary.
Don't get me wrong, they obviously lose a lot of picks, but for a team that's genuinely going for it, they're in win now mode. Like it's this year and next year, and then, their aging players start to vanish. Um, you take a Stanley Cup over your next all of these picks that they've given up. Like they win a Stanley Cup, none of these picks matter. I don't think any of their fans are going to sit there and go, "Oh man, I really wish we had our 2024 first round pick in the draft when you've just won a cup." Um, so yeah, 100%. I think they've done so well. They didn't really need to improve their side, and they have. They've added another goal scorer to their mix, and they've added a really, really solid defenseman to their mix, who, as we've seen so far, is really, really panning out for them. So yeah, can't fault this trade deadline from the Boston Bruins.
Yeah,
It's an A plus.
solid A plus. They haven't stepped a foot wrong so far this year. Alrighty, on to the Buffalo Sabres. They did a little bit more in regards to smaller trades in the trade deadline. Getting a seventh for Asplin, picking up Greenway for I don't know what that trade is, a second and a fifth. He's not worth that, but they get a player that they wanted, a bit more grit. Just a couple of AHL swaps, future considerations. They get a third for Portillo, and then they get Stillman from Vancouver. So pretty lackluster in regards to what they've done. I think it's kind of a failing grade because of that Greenway trade. I think they're just giving
Hmm.
up way too much for a player that I don't really rate that highly, and he is on 3 million, which is also a high salary cap hit.
Yeah, I mean, he could turn it around and become something. He's got terms, so there is that aspect of it. But yeah, a second and a fifth for him, it's a pretty hefty price. So yeah, look, I probably wasn't expecting them to do too much, given they've only just really entered the fold. But yeah, it's definitely lackluster for me, and the overpay for Greenway just sort of tips the scale to a fail mark, I reckon.
Yeah, it's just barely a fail mark, like D plus. Um,
Yeah.
just barely failing, but just overpaying for Greenway. And I feel like they could have added just a little bit more, um, but they didn't have to, so they didn't really need to. But they are in that playoff hunt. Didn't need to go out for rentals, but yeah, just that Greenway trade. Al-
Exactly. Right,
Alrighty,
on to Detroit.
yes, the Wings who did quite a lot in regards to the deadline. I'll let you have a talk through it. It's a little bit to go through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll go through the list
Yeah.
of what is Steve Yzerman, right? Yeah. Look, I think again another one who similar to Washington's management, although they're in different phases of their franchises. But I thought this was great by Yzerman. He addressed the fact that um, yes, they could compete, and they were sitting in a playoff position when they made these moves, but he saw that they were gonna compete, but at what cost? They probably weren't going to be they weren't guaranteed a playoff spot, and they weren't really guaranteed they were gonna go anywhere once they got to playoffs. They still missed several pieces, and if they went for it, they risked losing a ton of assets for absolutely nothing. So yeah, he made the call and he made a difficult call, but I think it was the right call. He gets rid of Oscar Sundquist for a fourth round pick. Great, gets a return. He gets rid of Tyler Bertuzzi for a first and a fourth. Absolutely fantastic. Um, Tyler Bertuzzi, yes, he can score goals, but he's also injury prone. There's other issues there as well. So ultimately, great return. The Hronik trade to Vancouver, brilliant. You know, he gets another first round pick this year, gets a second as well on top of that, which essentially is another first round pick in this year's draft pick because it's Vancouver's pick. So he's ended up with a pick that's probably going to be anywhere from 12th to 20th, and another pick that's going to probably be anywhere from 35 to 40. So brilliant in that aspect. The only sort of question mark I had was his cap dump of Jacob Verana. If it was a complete cap dump and it was all 5.2 mil, I probably would have said, yep, cool, understand it, way to go. They retain half of Verana's salary, and given the player that Verana has been, if he gets back into a little bit of that form, he's suddenly worth a fair bit. So yeah, that's the only question mark. I'd still like what they did of freeing up cap space to use next year, but that was the only real question mark I had out of this entire period from Detroit. The rest of it I thought was
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Well, they've been trying to move on him for a while, so that's why they do it. They just wanted to separate ways eventually, finally from him, and they get rid of Bertuzzi. I don't think they thought they could sign him or wanted to sign him. I know Larkin was a little bit upset that Bertuzzi left, but it looks like management just thought they couldn't get a deal done, and it wasn't going to work out. So he gets great assets in return, and
Yeah,
not like
fantastic.
everything they've done. And well, we'll just reveal it. Nice A plus. He couldn't really do it any better. They made the decision to not push for the playoffs. They weren't ready, especially after those two Ottawa games back to back. And honestly, good haul in regards to picks. As you can see below, they got like five in the first two rounds. So doing really good there.
Yeah, and Detroit fans, in use them and you trust because yeah, I think you guys are headed in the right direction. He's not after 1 or 2 years of quick and easy success. He's after a dynasty. So stay patient and trust in the man because he is leading you in the right direction.
Alrighty, on to Florida. Team did absolutely nothing. I'm just gonna reveal it straight now. It's just a straight F. You,
It's it's uh it's not the only F they're getting this year because they have been trash.
yeah,
Um yeah,
like
it's been a massive fall from grace.
yeah, like they're missing the future first rounders as well. Missing a second, missing this year's third. Like they're missing picks. They need cap space. They don't add anything into. They are still in the hunt for a playoff wildcard spot theoretically, and they don't add anything to push for that. Not that they really could with missing some of those picks. Just straight F.
Yeah,
I
it's
think a
just
big failure.
that draft board of theirs, that draft board is a draft board of a contender, and these guys aren't even in a playoff spot. that's how bad they failed this year. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Florida fans, but I think yeah, they've got to look at coaching. They've got to look at that side of things because yeah, they've absolutely shut the bed this year, unfortunately.
Yeah. Give Vancouver's ex-coach a home, I reckon. And on regards to their draft board, it looks very similar to Tampa's, and we know what Tampa's done.
Mhm,
So yeah,
exactly right.
on to
All
Montreal.
right, on to Montreal. This is a another one that's I think you pointed it out when we were talking off air. Lackluster from a team that is down the bottom, and you probably expected a little bit more movement from them, but not overly a lot. They piggybacked off the Benino trade, um, retaining their salary for Pittsburgh for a fifth round pick, um, a nothing AHL contract trade with the Kings, and then obviously they picked up Granov for Dadanov, which ultimately I think is probably a win for Montreal, given Granov is an RFA, and if a change of scenery could bring him back, that'd be amazing. But ultimately, pretty lackluster, and nothing really happened on their front. So yeah, I don't have too much more to say on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like what they did. It's almost F ranking material for me, just for the fact like they don't get rid of Hoffman. I know there's not much of a market for him, but they don't get rid of Hoffman. They got a couple other UFAs they didn't move. They that
Edmondson.
they're kind of at the salary cap on a team that's not even in their playoff hunt. They didn't get rid of Sean Monahan. I know he's in the long term injured, but that's a good trade asset wasted if especially if he doesn't resign as it's his last year. And my other thing is that like you look at their players and it's just like acquired through trade, sign, trade. Like there's very few that have been drafted and they're not really big name drafts that they've acquired. And you see in this trade deadline they didn't pick up any picks again. So yeah, a little bit lackluster. I don't like the vision that they're going in. Apparently they don't have a scouting and development team for the picks, and I don't like a team when they do that. So they could sit mediocre area for a while if they continue that. I know they got two firsts. They do have Florida's first round pick this year, but yeah, I just wanted to add that as well. So, like I said, almost F tier, but D tier because they're what they do get is it's serviceable, but it's nothing great, and I don't feel like it's going quite in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean they've got some young talent that they have picked up from the draft in the last couple years. Obviously, Caulfield and Slavkovsky, but they got a couple others in Philip Messer and um,
Yeah, but
yeah, a
like at the
few
start of
others.
the start of the year, you look at how they were dealing with Slavkovsky, and like they're just not managing their
Oh
assets
no,
correctly.
no, and they've been like that for a long time. They have a history of trading out quality young talent. That young talent goes and kills it elsewhere, and then Montreal just stick in this foreverness of mediocrity. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It is a bit disappointing. They had a lot of assets there. I mean, they had Josh Anderson that was spoken about potentially being traded. Jonathan Druin, I get he hasn't been huge this year, but you still could have moved him for something. Um, Retained his salary. Hoffman, should have moved on him. Christian Dvorak, I know he's still got a couple of years left, but you have pieces there that aren't going to be a part of your future because you're a few years away from competing. So they really should have tried to flip something into assets, especially in a deep draft. So very disappointing from Montreal. Definitely a well earned D.
Alrighty, on to the Ottawa Senators, and um, well, there's a lot to say on this one. Not really. It's really just the one big trade. They get their man in Jacob Chikrin. They don't have to sell the world for him either. They do sell a bit, offering their picks, first, 2 seconds, and conditions on some of those. They get Patrick Brown for a six, so a little bit of depth. They give up Zaitsev, freeing up some cap space, so they can go and get a Chikrin, and they give up a second and a fourth for that, so pretty pricey. And then they get Julian Gunther and a seventh for Tyler Motte. So honestly, it's a good one just because they get their man. They address their issue in regards to the D. They get better there. They're already playing better since the trade deadline. I know that's hindsight, but it looks like it's working out, which we didn't count into the grading. But they get their man, and they didn't have to pay the world, though it is a few picks.
100%. I think ultimately that's what I liked about it. I was saying throughout the year how high I've been on Ottawa, how much I like what they're doing, but the big thing they need is they need that defender, and Jacob Chikrin would be a great fit for this side. They finally get him. I know it took a lot. They obviously had to talk Arizona down on the price, but ultimately worked really well for them. They get what they wanted, they get what they needed. They don't pay the world, as you said, and it also helps them this year and for 2 years down the track as well. So yeah, it's not a lot. Obviously, there's not a lot going on here, but ultimately, I think this is exactly what Ottawa needed, and yeah, it really works out well for them. Solid A minus.
Yeah, good A minus. They get the man they want. Hopefully selling the team. That if that does end up going to the famous old movie star Deadpool, um, if that does end up happening, that'd be nice. Think the last time I heard it was around 800 million was the talking point,
Impressed, yeah,
which is a bit
crazy.
higher than what the 600 plus that we were looking at earlier. But on to
Mm.
Tampa. Didn't do too much.
Yes,
And well, yeah, big opinions on this one. They trade Nemestikov for Eisenmont, just depth trade, and then the big trade, Tanner Janot for Cowfoot, a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and basically just like the world for Tanner Janot. On like we said earlier, it's probably up there, if not worse, than the Adam Larson Taylor Hall trade. I can't
they
see how.
sold the farm.
Yeah,
They
the
sold
farm's
the
gone.
farm.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
no more pigs, there's no more horses, there's nothing.
yeah.
And I don't know if it makes them that much better for another push into the cup final. We'll have to
Mhm.
wait and see. And obviously
I
they're
don't think you
yeah.
say. Yeah, I don't think you say Tampa fails too often lately, right? Like the last time you would have said that would have been what 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. Um, yeah, it's crazy. It's just I don't know. I don't know if they're just fatigued, maybe a bit of lack of sleep and too much action over the last 3 years. But yeah, something wasn't right on the day that Tanner Jeannot trade happened.
Someone sold their soul at Nashville
Yeah.
to get all the trades they got coming. And yeah,
Oh,
you look at their
nothing.
draft table, no firsts, moving their 2 seconds, and no thirds. So basically, 1 to 5 of this year gone. Only has six and a seventh, and they're not going to be getting picks anytime soon. So they're going to have to hope that they keep maintaining this good run. Obviously, they've got good players, but they are getting older. But they still have players that are young, like Braden Point, that I like. But doing trades like this make me worry. So,
Yeah. Look,
mm.
you take the 2 cups any day of the week. Like I'll say that.
Oh yeah, but the
What
cups are gone.
annoys
The
Yeah,
cup.
and that's what annoys me about it a little bit, right? Like they don't make this Tanner Jeannot trade. They've actually got a pretty good draft there. Like, they've got some reasonably good picks, and yeah, yeah, it's baffling. Hey, I will point this out though. Their draft table is better than Florida's, and they've got 2 cups to their name. So
Yep.
I'll give them that.
But
But
on
definitely a fail.
onto the grade, straight F. Um, don't think they could have done worse, honestly.
No,
And they may have even been better, just not doing anything at all. But I guess on
okay.
to the final last one, the Toronto
Finish with
Maple
a
Leafs.
bang.
And yeah,
Finish with a bang.
what a long little list this is, eh? Do you want to finish this one off?
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely will because we've had a obviously few discussions around this, but I was actually really impressed with Toronto and what they did. I know they've done a lot, and that's one of the big questions. Have they done too much? But ultimately they needed to do something, and they did it. Um, but yeah, so they pick up Luke Shen for a third solid defender, exactly what Toronto needed, and they got him. They basically returned that third round pick for Engvall, which is no great loss. Then this is the interesting one. I get why they did it, but there would be some question marks. They get rid of Rasmus Sandin, which is one of their young defenders, but in return they get a real gritty defender in Gustafsson, and they get a first round pick, which is big. Um, so yeah, ultimately they get two gritty defenders, which is something that they really need on their blue line. That's not it though. There's plenty more. Then they go and get a third gritty defender in Jake McCabe. They get a depth forward in Sam Lafferty, and they give up Joey Anderson, Pavel Gugulov at a 2025 first round pick, which is theirs, top 10 protected, and a 2026 second round pick. Ultimately, I thought that trade for Jake McCabe was really good. Yep, they lose a first round pick, but honestly, not too much else. And they pick up a really good defender, which they need, and a depth defenseman. Now, on top of that, that was also after this first blockbuster trade, which was them picking up Ryan O'Reilly. But not just Ryan O'Reilly, they also picked up Nola Kiri. So, they get a third line center. Ryan O'Reilly, it was a first line center in his heyday, and that was only a couple of years ago. So have Ryan O'Reilly on the third line. I know as of today he's gone to the long-term injured reserve list, so it kind of doesn't sound as great at the moment, but at the time, this trade was fantastic. They get a third line center who, is a fantastic player. He's a big body, he's gritty, exactly what they need. They get another depth forward in Nola Kiri, who's again exactly what they need. They give up a first, a second, and a third, and a couple of prospects, but ultimately not too much for what it was. So yeah, look, a lot of changes, but in my opinion, exactly what Toronto needed. They needed grit. They needed to be stronger in the playoffs. They addressed it. They got the players. And now, for their sake, you just hope that Ryan O'Reilly gets back because that is going to be one of the big keys. I think they are as geared as ever to finally get out of the first rounds.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid that you have to do all this just to get out of the first round. But yeah, like they said, Brian O'Reilly should hopefully be back before the end of the season. So hopefully get some games under his belt before the playoffs. But we'll have to wait and see. The other thing with these trades is like you're looking at their draft table. They don't have any second rounds for the next 4 years. Like the next four second rounds, they don't have one. They've traded a few couple of their firsts gone, a couple of their third rounds, their fourth rounds. They've really gone for it. My issue and why I don't rate this as an A plus, even though they address all their issues, is I think they should have been addressing these issues in past seasons, and they shouldn't have to do all these trades at once. And secondly, doing so many trades, you bring in like 30 something percent or whatever of a team, um, can ruin chemistry, and maybe people don't get along, something like that. That can happen. So that's why I'm reserved about this, and obviously losing so much in regards to their picks for the future for basically one season maybe two. But obviously, with Matthews' contract coming up and all of that, you got to please the people. But that's why I don't give it an A plus. It's still very high ranked. It's an A, but I just couldn't get an A plus because I feel like they should have been doing this over the last few years, and it would have helped them get it past the first round in the past years as well.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely a lot for one trade deadline. It's going to be a big question mark of how they sort of link together, but ultimately, the one thing I will say is that is why they get an A is they addressed everything that they possibly needed. Yeah, we can talk about they should have done it in previous years and how will they gel chemistry wise. At the end of the day, he addressed the issues that has held them back in the past, and he has given them and set them up as best as he can to go on an actual run in the playoffs finally.
Yeah, it's just a scared man for his job, really going all out. And he said it wasn't because of that, but you can look at these trades and go, scared little boy, about his job. But yeah, no, they've done good. Set themselves up as best as they can. Hopefully, if chemistry and whatnot behind scenes all works out, and they don't disrupt the Lions too much. Hopefully, it all works out. Hopefully, for Toronto's sake, they get past round one and even past round two because this type of team and with these type of trades, they should be going to the conference final. But we know the East is stacked. But yes, I guess that's it. That's all our ratings. Let us know what you think of our ratings. Do you agree or disagree on our ratings and where they should have been, higher or lower? And let us know your thoughts. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. And until next time, we'll catch you later.
Take care, guys.